I'll keep an eye if you want, Fiona, and just keep letting people in that are stuck in the lobby.
Yes, that would be great, because I'm not sure my multitasking skills will reach that far. Okay, there's a few people coming through. Feel free to eat your lunch while you listen, or do whatever it is you usually do at lunchtime. We're not precious about anything like that. Is that you putting your camera on, Emma, because you're eating your lunch? I'll give it one more minute and then we'll get cracking. That's a very good and very practical question, Nev. Who is driving the slides? Who is responsible for that key action?
That's me.
Is that you, Chloe? Brilliant.
It
Having
is,
safe
yeah.
hands. Lovely.
Can you see that?
I can. Looking very collaborative-y coloured. And I think this is the first time I've used my background in any sort of broader meeting, so I keep looking up and catching sight of myself against the bright blue and getting a bit of a shock. But it's better than my paper-strewn office behind me. Right, okay, I'm going to make a start, and people can just join as and when they get a few minutes. So welcome to the Primary Care Collaborative Autumn Engagement event. The more observant amongst you will have noticed we skipped summer, and that was really because there was never a good time to try and avoid holidays or pressure periods. So we thought we'd rather do it in the autumn when people are back. We've picked a very auspicious day because not only is it Remember the 5th of November, but actually it's also the US presidential election. So I don't know if anybody else has had a slightly sick feeling in their stomach for a couple of weeks now as to what might go on there. So it absolutely wasn't deliberate. We're not trying to steal the thunder of Trump and Harris. My name is Fiona Adamson. I am by day the Chief Exec of the Hartlepool and Stockton Health GP Federation. I've been working in Hartlepool and Stockton for about 9 years now, I think. I think we'll also have some board members on today as well. So perhaps as we go, we might get the opportunity to introduce you to some of the wider Primary Care Collaborative team. But we have an agenda today to share with you. We will be with you for up to an hour, depending on how many questions you ask. And that just gives you a run through of the kind of things we're going to talk about. So a little bit on since we last met, and there's been a lot gone on. An update in a little bit more detail on a couple of the Primary Care Collaborative priorities. So you can see there, primary care workforce strategy and digital update. Thank you so much to those of you who have taken the time to complete the online survey. We've got a summary of some of the thoughts from across the patch to share with you, but then we'll just have an opportunity to see what's on your minds and see where the conversation takes us. So without further ado, I think we'll get cracking. Be really interesting, and I wonder if you could put in the chat to see what sort of range of people we have on the call. I think we're up to about 45 here. Actually, if I was doing my housekeeping properly, I would say that we are recording this just for people who perhaps can't attend, or also just to give us the chance to go back over any thoughts and questions. So just to make you aware of that, and hopefully you won't have any issues with that. Yes, I wonder if you would put in the chat which bit of primary care you're from. Oh, Alex, you beat everybody to it there. Yeah, because I think that will give us an interesting idea. Oh, there's some names from my past coming up here as well. So thank you for doing that. And I'll move on to the first item on the agenda. So goodness me, what a lot has happened since we were last together, some of us. Clearly, we have a new government elected on a landslide that's had a fairly rocky ride in their first few weeks in office, you'd have to say. But what we have seen, which I think was different, we've seen a candid recognition that there are some serious issues in the NHS. There were various election promises, which we've listed there. I want to come back to Wes Streeting in a sec, but yes, some bold statements fixing the front door to the NHS. And then we've just had the budget. So yes, an overall increase, but I would argue that increase so far is not necessarily reflective of some of the comments on the right of that slide. So one of the most important developments since, well, in the last few weeks was the rapid Darcy report. I forget how many pages it was now. It was something like 163 or something like that. Fascinating, actually, for those of you who've read it or read some of the fantastic summaries that are out there that save you the trouble. First of all, those principles on the right are clearly here to stay. The hospital to community, the cure to prevention, and the analogue to digital. They are clearly going to be the themes. A couple of the other things that struck me in the Darcy report, and you can have a look at our commentary on the website, actually, if you'd like to, but firstly, perhaps naively, I was expecting more solutions, and this really was a diagnosis type report. So if you haven't seen the opportunity to get involved and have your say, that's open at the moment. Actually, even if you just want a few minutes to have a bit of fun, it's worth reading it, because there's, there are Labradors being recommended as health secretary and all sorts in there. But there are some serious, some interesting points in there too. The Darcy report, I thought, was very complimentary of primary care, of the opportunities for pharmacy, of the GP model, the value for money, the efficiency of the GP model, for example, was held up as something that the rest of the broader NHS system could look at. So all in all, I think that report was fairly positively received in the sense that it felt honest. It said things that we're not used to people saying out loud. It didn't gloss over many of the difficult issues that all of us face on a day-to-day basis. So Darcy is here to stay. So I also would be remiss of me not to mention a couple of less political, if you like, items that have gone on since last time. One, of course, is GP collective action, which has started to gather pace in many areas. And the other one is the pharmacies in their own way also held a day of action where they effectively dressed the pharmacies in black, and just tried to reference the fact that without the right long-term funding, pharmacies won't necessarily be here to stay either. So our sector continues to face immense pressure. And I think we are yet to see any practical input from the changing government. So if we come on to the next slide, and then I said I would come back to the Wes Streeting point. In primary care collaborative terms, since last time, some of you might have seen this, some of you might not. We have agreed a governance framework and representation. It's a very small bullet point, but it was a lot of work to get to that point when you have general practice, pharmacy, optometry, and dentistry all coming together in a room. And we actually came out, and lots of you gave us some interesting feedback on what representation should look like, etc. So you can see the board on the right of the primary care collaborative. So part of the feedback, for example, was that the GP role should be more represented. So you can see we have a co-opted clinical chair. I don't think Mooney can join us today. Don't think he's in the office today. But Mooney is the co-chair alongside myself of the PCC. And we felt that clinical voice was really important. And then we have 2 reps from optometry, 2 reps very, very newly from pharmacy. So Pete is joining Grant. And we continue to work on our dentistry colleagues. But all in all, we've got some really engaged, really positive people who are trying their best to make a bit of a difference. Right, okay, so if I just flick on to the progress against priorities, now we come down to perhaps some of the more detailed sessions. By all means, put your hand up if you want to ask a question, and when we get to the end of each session, we'll take those questions all together, and then we'll have the general discussion at the end. So this grid is available on our website. This were self-generated priorities from those people that you saw on the previous screen and from talking to the people they work with every day in their various member organisations. What we tried to do was bear in mind that we are a primary care collaborative, and therefore working together should be one of the real priorities for us. We look at these things through the lens of what's the population health data telling us and what can we do about that, and also the key priorities of access, what can we do with digital, and what can we do to work with our partners in a more joined up and perhaps more integrated way. So we're going to touch on a couple of things in more detail today, but I just wanted to show with you they're the sort of areas. So keep your fingers crossed for a primary care conference to celebrate all things great in the spring. We are working on some leadership development training for those primary care people who are now finding themselves in sort of local system and place roles. Pharmacy First we touched on last time we talked together. We're going to go into more detail on the summary care records today, and then I mentioned the population health management. Many of you will have seen the Community of 1,000 reports, for example, which we also want to try and bring to life for pharmacy, optometry, dentistry colleagues too, but the next version of that support is coming along very, very soon. So before I sort of hand over to the more detailed examples and deep dives into a couple of the priorities, I just wanted to reflect for a minute. So if I just come on to the next slide. Thanks, Chloe. Fundamental point was why a primary care collaborative. And for those of you who got involved and did some thinking and some feedback in the early days of us coming together, one of the things we said was we felt that the voice of primary care could be lost in the new system structures. And that was a really fundamental worry for many of us. We wanted to try and address that. And we wanted to try in many ways to help the ICB address that on such a big geographical footprint. And then we worked together to come up with this vision. So not the voice, but a combined voice, because we felt that was quite unique. And also, if we understand a little bit more as to what each sector does, what our mutual challenges are, what our individual challenges are, then surely by working together, the output should be that we can improve the health of the people who live across the North East and North Cumbria. So that was the vision we came up with. I just want to touch for a minute on that strong voice point. So, because I think this is one of the things where perhaps behind the scenes, we've had a little bit of success. So we said we were worried that primary care would not be as represented as perhaps it had been in the past because of the changes. I've just sort of summarised on a very boring slide some of the rooms that we have actually been in recently. So I've just mentioned that we are elected members from those groups you can see on the screen. We've also supported the clinical director colleagues to relaunch the CD forum, which I believe happened last week and will be continuing on a regular basis. So that's another really good way of working together across the North East and North Cumbria, but also having that strong voice for CDs. I'm just going to summarise really quickly some of the voices that we've heard recently as a collaborative, some of the rooms we've been in, some of the events we've been invited to. So I'll start with Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting held a couple of leadership events for NHS England and DHSC leaders, where many of them were in a room down in London, but also lots of people like us virtually in that room. I could go on for quite some time about what that was like. I think the two things that really struck me was, one, the atmosphere. So it was very much NHSE and DHSC together. How many initials can I get in one sentence? Whereas my impression is in the past, they were two quite distinct groups that weren't necessarily used to being collegiate. This is just my personal take. Absolute commitment to Darcy, absolute commitment to what's coming out of that. A strong desire for change. The word that was used most frequently was reform. So don't come to me with proposals to continue the status quo. Come to me with proposals for reform, was the quote in a nutshell. And also, I would have to say, a fair amount of anger at the GP collective action. Now, don't shoot the messenger there, but that's how, certainly that came across quite strongly from Wes Streeting personally. Coming down to the next bullet point, the North Eastern Yorkshire Best Practice event hosted by NHS England. We had a few, I think probably 3 reps along there. It was a very rainy day in Leeds, I have to say. We presented the Pharmacy First work that the collaborative has been doing, which went down really well. The third one, so Claire Fuller, who is a GP who was previously chief exec of an ICB down in Surrey and is now the primary care medical director, is very much a supporter of primary care and very public about it. So I went down to a meeting in London, and I suppose I just want to share with you who was in the room. So obviously Claire was convening this meeting. First speaker was Amanda Pritchard. She, I think a couple of things to highlight. She talked about everything had changed in terms of NHS England and the new government and the new approach, but she also talked about nothing had changed because there was no extra money. Well, we've had a budget since then. The other thing that I found really encouraging was she was very quite adamant about the fact that primary care leaders must have equal voices in their local systems, which I thought was a really positive statement. Who else was there? So Amanda Doyle, who is the primary care director within NHS England. Again, she talked about the GP in Rs and the fact that that would be continuing. She also referenced the PCN test beds that are going on, which are 7 ICSs with something like 20 or 25 PCNs within them who are going through a very intense data collection period to inform future models. They were very keen to stress that they are not testing future models, they are informing future models of care. Navina Evans, Workforce Director, was there. Professor Sir Stephen Powis, who is the NHS England Medical Director, was there. You could tell how, complimentary he was and how much he appreciated the role of community pharmacy in particular, and also GPs, who he regarded as being some sort of awesome expert generalist. So again, very positive. And then the day was finished with a Q&A with some of the chief officers of pharmacy, optometry, dentistry, plus the people I've referenced. So I suppose what I'm saying is these people all got in a room together on one day in London to talk to national primary care leaders from the places and the ICBs. And that makes a really strong statement about how important primary care is nationally. I found that very positive. Coming back locally, finally, we as a primary care collaborative have a seat on the ICB system leadership group, which is Sam Allen's leadership group for the ICB. So that's with the trust chief execs, the FT collaborative, etc. We've got a great relationship with the ICB primary care team, which we're trying to build on. We've got some good links into the digital team where we think that there could be some very positive influencing to be done. And we're starting to have, I think somebody's just come off mute, I think. And if you wouldn't mind having a little check to see if it's you. And then finally, the FT collaborative, where we've started to have regular meetings, and that will be quite interesting in terms of the primary secondary interface. So apologies for the long list, but hopefully you see that some of that strong voice is starting to come to fruition. Now, of course, probably the more astute amongst you will say, well, it's what you do with that voice once you get in there, and I completely accept that. But it is a start to be in there and to be talking to the right people. So that's a general update. I'm going to pass you on to Michael now, who is leading a piece of work for us, which we have been commissioned by the ICB to do. And we're very positive about that because if a primary care collaborative didn't exist, then actually we're not sure where that work would have been done. So we are absolutely getting the opportunity in this instance to shape some of our own destiny. So Michael's going to give you a whistle stop tour, and I don't think there's any hands up, so I'm okay to move on. Yes. So thank you, Michael.
Well, thanks, Fiona. I'm just checking, am I still on a 10-minute whistle stop or less if
You
I can?
absolutely are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Tate. I work for NENC, but I've been supporting the Primary Care Collaborative since last November. If you attended any of the initial sessions we did, you might saw me presenting on some of the pharmacy work. But from there, as Fiona said, moving into the workforce strategy. So what I'm going to describe today is the scoping phase of the workforce strategy. Thank you, which took place between May and July and should form what's going to become the foundation of a long-term actionable workforce strategy. So the goal of this phase was to assess the workforce landscape, try and understand, identify key areas for workforce development across the 4 pillars of primary care. So yeah, that's the general practice, dentistry, optometry and pharmacy. We working with the ICB, we set a scope, which very broadly was engagement with key stakeholders across NENC, which create that ownership from the start, identify those workforce challenges, gaps, and some strategic opportunities, and create a foundation of a strategy which is aligned with the ICS goals and the national picture. But also very conscious that we don't duplicate in any of this work that we're doing. So looking at local and national alignment. So, for example, one of the big alignments would be the recently developed NENC People and Culture Strategy, and focusing on that collaboration, upskilling and system integration. So there'll be a lot of overlap with what we look at and what we discuss and how we apply that into primary care. The next slide, please. So the approach we took with this was semi-structured interviews. So it was a list of questions, but we had a 45 minutes to an hour where we would discuss with predominantly the core members of the Primary Care Collaborative, their representatives, and some of their ICB counterparts, just to get this understanding of what was going on. The semi-structure gives us a consistent level of information because we ask the same questions, but it also leaves enough scope for some natural organic conversations, which lets us get a feel for how things are going beyond what perhaps we designed at the outset. And some of those key principles were, that alignment with the wider strategic system goals. We continuously look to improve our process, and that iterative development. So each conversation could be informed by the last, and just a curiosity, encouragement to give a forum to talk about the challenges, but also be bold in our aspirations for how we would move this forward. Next slide, please. So throughout all the engagements, there was a number of themes which emerged quite clearly, and I think it won't come as a surprise to anyone. So recruitment and retention, workforce development were the 2 top ones that jumped through there. System-wide working, which obviously spans far beyond primary care, but is something which wasn't a single conversation where we didn't talk about how things could be improved if we looked right the way across the system. And also some of those commissioning and funding challenges that maybe restrict our ability to do what we are skilled to do and what we would like to do. And some of the enabling things that come across that. So a population health management approach would be good at making those strategic decisions and developments for our workforce. But some of the real sticking points are on the estates and infrastructure that maybe prevent us from going where we want to, and the technology and digital support which would enable us to do that. So just to go not through all of this, because a lot of information there, and this is absolutely not doing justice to the depth of the work that was undertaken, but just to give a flavour. So, and if there's anything that anyone else wants to pick up after this, please just get in touch. I think with recruitment and retention, there was a real feel there was a difficulty in attracting skilled staff at the moment, and that's compounded by competition from a lot of private providers. So maybe we have people who qualify, who work for us for a little while and then step out because the environment's different, because the offer's presented better. But ultimately, there's the career progression pathways are something which comes up quite regularly. That falls into the development as well. So there's gaps in upskilling and structured career paths. We have a lot of offers from a learning and development perspective across the region, but perhaps they aren't aligned, and we can't see how they can join up to give us a greater development offer for our staff. System-wide collaboration, challenges around needing enhanced cross-sector collaboration. There's a lot of duplication in roles, which creates confusion, which then doesn't give patients or staff the best access and best experience through the system. And another challenge, that the funding and digital integration, so contract funding and restrictions, limited digital infrastructure doesn't allow the workforce to work, to become empowered and work how they would like to deliver what we believe we need within the region. So flipping that straight from challenge to opportunities, because one directly feeds the other. If you can move on to the next slide there, please. So I think there's a definite desire, and there's some stuff that already exists. So how do we maybe tap into that about developing clear pathways for career development? And with that comes a commitment to educator roles, it was felt. So fostering that retention. So give people the space to develop others and give individuals the space to develop, I think was a really strong message. Collaboration, greater resource sharing, coordinated care pathways. It's easy to say, it's a lot harder to do, but looking wider and saying, actually, how can we work together? How can we come out of our silos perhaps, and how can we help each other across primary care? And then consider with the wider work how that ripples out across the system. And the digital transformation. So how can we integrate more digital tools and digital access to improve patient care and support workforce productivity? Some of this will be picked up in a later presentation, but it's all these things where people can. The scoping phase is very much about understanding what people felt at this point in time, how we've been restricted, where we could potentially go, being given the power to kind of develop our own strategy. And then again, to the next slide, please. So that takes us to the next steps. You'll see from the top bar there that was a scoping exercise. It was an intensive piece of work. It generated a phenomenal amount of insight and information, and more than we could ever present in one showing. But what it did tell us was there's a phenomenal desire across the region for all of our staff to develop, to support each other, to work, continue in the NHS, but create an environment where we can do more, where we know we can. And some of this is about things we can control within our own environment, and some is about influence and how we perhaps challenge some of the systems and infrastructures which we work within to allow us to work at the top of the license, was something which continually came up in those discussions. So what we've done is we've taken all this information, say that ran to July, we hit sticky point through the summer, but in October we think we've landed on what the next phase of this will look like, and that's going to be a series of structured engagements, which is open to as many people as will join and engage in these discussions. There will be surveys, there will be drop-ins, we will run them where and when we need to, but we've done the scoping with those who we had access to. Now we really need to validate this information and turn it into something, and let's understand what it means at the delivery level, and not just strategic and management, but actually what do these insights mean, and how do they translate into action? And throughout this next phase of the process, ultimately what we'll come out with is a strategy which has a number of potential work streams, which we believe are achievable. And this is, I should have said at the outset, the challenge was set to us by the ICB that this was a 3 to 5 year strategy. This is something that we have to be ambitious for. So if there are quick wins that we achieve along the way, perfect. but also this has to give us a leg up into the future, and everything Fiona's talked about around the strategic environment and what's changing from a national perspective. We need to be in a position where our workforce can respond to those needs. That is me in one breath. Is there anything else, Fiona, you would like to add in that?
No, that was, and I think you were timed to the minute as well. So thank you very much for that. I think I suppose the call to action and the plea is for when those dates come out for as many people as possible to drop in or to give their views. There'll be different ways that you can do that so that what we come out with is really compelling, and we're then able to go to the ICB and say, if you enable us to put this into action, that will improve the working lives of our members and it will improve the health of our patients. And that's got to be the aim. So I think you've got away with no questions at this point, Michael. So it may be some people have some towards the end. So I'm going to move on to Nev. I mentioned earlier that one of the priorities was to think about things through the lens of digital, and it links back to Darcy as well. I don't want to steal Nev's thunder, but this was one of the, but I'm going to anyway. This was one of the areas where everyone around the table felt that a difference could be made to patient care if our colleagues in optometry and dentistry in particular were able to follow pharmacy in having access to some of the patient information for those people who are in front of them in the right circumstances. Benefit to patients is clear, the benefit to those guys working is clear, but also the knock-on effect to GP practices who quite often felt like they were being used as a postbox. So this was a big ask, this one, but we think we're getting somewhere, Nev, don't we? So I'll stop stealing your thunder and be quiet.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, so I'm Nev. So Neville Flanagan, head of Northeast consultancy team in NENC. Working alongside Michael and others in the team as well. So as Fiona said, just the next slide, please, Chloe. As Fiona's already said, we ran a priority workshop in May, and this came through loud and clear as a clear priority. I don't think anyone had a clue or an idea how this would be done. It was a bit of a pipe dream. It was a bit of a, wouldn't it be amazing if, kind of one of those sessions. So that's where it all started. So like I said, a team of us set away working through this. The challenge was clear. It was really to see if what the art of the possible. I hate that phrase and I use it all the time because really there's never a more appropriate saying than that for this. It was really, would it be even possible to get access for mainly optometry and dentistry, access to patient level information within the summary care record. So again, the scope was around identifying the specific needs, but also those challenges across primary care relating to summary care records. Exploring really the potential benefits. Those benefits are really clear, as Fiona's already alluded to patients, but also the broader healthcare system and business. So business within optometry and dentistry as well. And understanding some of those concerns, some of the barriers. We spoke with the LMC, with GPs around what does this actually mean? What if this were to happen? What would some of those challenges, what would some of those concerns be, certainly around information governance, etc. And then looking to see what else was happening out there as well. So aligning with existing initiatives. So Fiona's already kind of mentioned the National Summary Care Record, so the NCRS, but there's also, some of you may be aware, some maybe not, around the Great North Care Record and the work that Lisa and the team are doing there as well. So the scene was set, we set up in around about August sort of time, to develop a comprehensive report and appraisal to then feed back to the board with some of our findings. So next slide, please, Chloe. So the next bit was how we engaged. So again, as Michael said, with the workforce piece, it was semi-structured interviews, very similar process. We carried out 9 interviews with 10 primary care representatives. As we said, that included as well LMC, LOC, LDC, all the representatives from those committees, but across dentistry, pharmacy, optometry and general practice. But we had all of those views fed into this. We also attended a Great North Care Record Roadmap event where until that point, a lot of noise had been made around what could be possible, but actually I think I'm fair to say we were at that point taken quite seriously. We'd obviously met with the ICB representatives as well when we talked about this, and we've now got optometry and dentistry, but pod and primary care as a whole firmly on that roadmap with the GNCR team as well. So that is firmly within their plans to take this forward. So next slide, please, Chloe. Just conscious I've got to get through. There's a lot of information on here. So through those interviews, we were able to identify, if you like, the problem statement. So we had a meeting with NHS England, with the National Summary Care Record team, and they almost set our homework out for us. It was come back to us with the problem that you want to fix, and let's see what we can do. So, like I said, we went off, we met with the teams, and we held those semi-structured interviews, looking at what the problems really were, and that really hinged around not having access to patient records, hindered the ability to provide accurate and timely care for patients, managing medication safely, wider across healthcare as well, how you work with those providers, but also inefficiencies around the process, how it didn't work. And as Fiona alluded to again, around that GPs being used as a bit of a post box for lots of referrals, for information, and obviously some of the significant challenges around patient information. And really there were 4 key areas that you can see there around medication, access to letters, in terms of letters that are referrals for consultants, etc., medical conditions and allergies. So they were the 4 real key areas across pod that were really coming through quite strongly. And in summary, and I think it was Jane from the LMC, we can't take it away from her, that she came up with this in summary in one of the interviews, was around improved patient experience and continuity of care can only be delivered through timely, appropriate and relevant access to patient records. And that kind of summed up everything that we were trying to do. So we took that information, we then found various other sort of solutions that we looked out there. But really, when we ran these through, we developed a whole matrix around case for change, the capability, implementation, cost, all of those kind of things. The 2 strongest ones were still coming through, which obviously the Great North Care Record, which is the ICB supported long-term solution for this and across NENC, but also the National Summary Care Record. So again, pharmacy already have access to this, but it's also used for out-of-hours GPs. And like I said, that quickly ruled out some of the other options that we were actually looking at in terms of possible solutions, which you can see on there as well. So again, next slide, please. I just really want to kind of get to the recommendations. So all of that information we fed back to the last primary care collaborative board in October, and again fed back to the board in terms of what some of these recommendations are. Like I said at the beginning, this was kind of a bit of a pipe dream. Do we think it would even be possible? What could we actually do? And what we've come up with is a plan, again working with the GNCR team, but also the national team, that we can actually run a short-term pilot. This is continuing to develop. We're still meeting with NHS England now, refining this, but we believe for optometry and dentistry, we can actually run a pilot to get at least 5 practices. So that's 5 optometry practices, 5 dentistry practices with access to the National Summary Care Record. The original plan was before Christmas. Actually, having further discussed this with optometry and dentistry with IG teams, we're now aiming to get those rolled out between January and February, hopefully. So by March, we can actually do a whole review of this and see how we've done. The Great North Care Record is still in the long-term plan, but for pharmacy in particular, they're going to see how we work together with the National Summary Care Record, because they're going to use that as business as usual. But in the medium term, continue to develop that further with National Summary Care Record, because it still doesn't give them quite everything they need. But that medium term for optometry dentistry will then be to roll this out further into the next financial year, with that roadmap then still leading onto the Great North Care Record as well. So again, looking at all of this information, running through the case for change, capability, implementation, we've actually been able to develop a plan now. So if you just go on to the next slide, Chloe, just to kind of show you the information, I don't expect anyone to read this, but this is the plan that we're looking to roll out. So we're actually going to develop the pilot now for optometry. Dentistry have come on board, and actually the original plan was to maybe scope out what we could do for dentistry, but they're so keen on this, we're actually going to pilot it with them and optometry at the same time. So this, again, summarizes all of that work. It's still a massively ambitious plan, but hopefully it comes through in my voice. And I know if Michael was talking, we are so excited about this and actually getting this on the map across NENC. It's kind of a really fantastic piece of work. And the last slide just gives credit to everyone, I think, Chloe, who were actually engaged in this whole process. And I think I've just hit me 10 minutes, Fiona.
Absolutely spot on. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nev. And I think sometimes when you summarize something so quickly, you don't realize quite what a journey it's been, but this could make a real difference to some of the colleagues out there, but more importantly to the patients who are going in for care. So it's brilliant. Right, I'm just going to go on to, hopefully we'll take the slides down in a sec, but those of you who've completed our survey, we thought we'd just bring up some of the bullet points that have come through so far. Now, I need to make an apology, first of all. When we sent the initial survey out, we used the word represent you. And actually, as you'll have heard me say at the start, this is the Primary Care Collaborative is not about representing, because that's the statutory function of LMCs, LPCs, etc. So please accept my apologies. It's purely a use of English rather than a change of intention. So I didn't want anyone to be confused about that. So if we just flick through the next couple of slides. So this is what you would talk to Wes Streeting about. I'm not going to read them out, but you can see some of the things that are coming through. What we'll do is we'll package these up when we've finished, and we'll make them accessible to you on the website or via some other means. So that's what you'd say to Wes so far. What could we be doing for you and on your behalf? I love the one on the right, be the biggest voice on the ICB board. Yeah, and some of it comes through as commissioning, etc., which again I would think is very often the role of some of those committees out there. But the reason that we are coming together as a collaborative is because we can help to amplify each other's voices and be a stronger voice together than we might be as individual professions. And then the last one, oh, excuse me, collaborative working. Yeah, there's all sorts around ours. Shadowing, that's interesting, isn't it? It's the kind of thing that would have happened years ago. Yes, we absolutely can, Paul. Yeah, we'll reshare the link. Yeah, and the bottom right really resonates with me. And in my day job, we're looking at a new service at the moment, working with our practices and PCNs and colleagues. And actually, the word I would use at this moment in time is daunting. Okay, so I'm just going to go on to the last slide just for a second and then take them down so that we can pick up any questions or thoughts or any comments you want to make. The last slide was just to remind you that there is a website out there that we are trying to keep as up to date as we can. We are a very small team, as you can probably see. But one of the things we're committed to do is trying to share positive news stories about primary care so that we get that profile and that brand out there. So Chloe is very happy to take your ideas and your thoughts and your stories, and we'll either highlight them on the website or we'll also share them with the ICB and the NHSE comms teams to see if we can get some profile for primary care in the region. And then on the right is a QR code that really cleverly takes you to our WhatsApp group. I think it does, where we are hoping to occasionally be able to canvass opinion for you to raise things. So I don't think we've quite got the momentum going with that yet, if I'm really honest. But that's because sometimes it waits for one of us in the evening to find a few minutes to say something. So I think if you join that, I'd really encourage you to use it. It's a joint tool rather than just a download tool. Right, so if we can take the slides down. Thank you very much, Chloe, and thank you for pulling those together. from us random people. Has anybody got any thoughts or questions or comments or anything that you'd like to, well, not anything, you know, hopefully nice things or constructive things that you'd like to say in response to anything you've heard? Or are you still eating sandwiches? Right, where we are. Sandy, hello, Sandy. How are you?
Hello, Fiona. Long time no speak.
I know.
I'm Sandy Keel, so I represent community pharmacy across the Tees Valley. Just one thing I think which would give a more enriched level of data is possibly to engage more around your information gathering with LPCs, LOCs and LDCs and LMCs as well. So all of the representative bodies, rather than just focus on one or two people in a specific area, it would just give a more rich level of data, because although we are one ICB, the differences in central Durham compared to Middlesbrough are very different. So it would just give us that range of knowledge, if you like, of what's needed.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point, Sandy. And I suspect, I know Tracy's put something in the chat about the first CD forum. I think that was probably a theme that came through there, unless I'm not much mistaken, that we do have additional challenges here, don't we? Because we are so big. So what goes on in different parts can actually be quite different. So yes, finding ways to seek broader views, you're absolutely right. Garant's been alone in the pharmacy world for a while, but now Pete's on board as well. So every little helps, as it were. Michael?
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, Sandy. And it was just the point, you know, even from the start of the workforce piece to, you know, there's another bit of work going at the moment about protected learning time, which we absolutely have recognised that point. So even though we can't get everyone around the table, we are seeking ways to get, and hopefully it's landed in your inbox or certainly in your regional inbox, about gathering those requirements. So we are aware, and we are actively seeking where we can those wider voices to inform, you know, what we do going forward. So it is the voice of the many, not the few, which is developing this.
Yeah, okay. And I think we've shared previously I think Nigel put our website address, and we can also put the email address up there as well. Oh, hi, Steph. I didn't see you earlier.
Well, I've only joined, so I'm a bit late. I'm in between today, so I'm only 5 minutes. But just to add to what the elders lady just mentioned. So my name's Stephanie Cairns. I'm an optometrist. I'm the chair of the LOC from the time of the year, but I'm also sitting on the primary care collaborative for optometry. There's 2 of us, and the LOCs actually both of their optometry reps, and we are actively going back to our LOCs, 4 LOCs across the region, to try and get collective kind of feedback. So pharmacy and dentistry really doing that same process, even if the reps on primary care collaborative aren't actually their LDC reps or LPC reps. There needs to be a communication between. I'm not saying we've got the right solution, just finding some capacity. But definitely groups function to this to work. And certainly as the engagement goes further forward, frequently primary care networks continue, and whatever the local delivery team network, whatever that ends up being, we need our local organisations to be able to engage with whatever is going to be there for the side of things. And we have certainly from top bad at that over the years, we've really struggled to get into the connection care networks, and that's something I just hasn't worked. I'm hoping once things are a little bit more sorted and care collaborative, start making that engagement.
You're just starting to break up, Steph. Sorry. I think towards the end, I don't know if it was just me or whether everybody else found it a little bit difficult to hear, but I think what you were saying was you'd got a framework together for going out for feedback within the LOCs, and that you're trying to build on that, and perhaps others could do the same. And I think, was that the summary?
Yeah, but also historically, engage with primary care networks or whatever you our niche area. And I hope that this great group connections that we care collaborative
Yeah.
LPC member will actually help that.
Okay, you've almost gone completely now for me, but but thank you for joining. I think what you were saying was that basically the collaborative members around the table together, we need to start thinking about how we make those local links with PCNs and pharmacies and create those relationships where they haven't existed or where they aren't as strong locally. Okay, actually, out of interest, I was flicking through the chat actually a few minutes ago, and I think we've got a much broader range of representatives this time around on our lunchtime call. Across pharmacy, we've got a few from optometry. We've got some wider ICB colleagues. I don't think we've got a dentist, so we're going to have to set our stall out to really encourage our dentistry colleagues to come on board. But perhaps Nev's summary care record pilot might be the answer to sort of engaging with our dentist colleagues a bit more closely. Has anyone else got anything that they would like to I suppose I'll ask you one final question actually now I think about it. Something came from one of our meetings, probably the meeting before last, when we were looking at what a collaborative could do. And I think it was John from Sunderland who said, really, we should be aiming high and we should be trying to make a difference to the working lives of those members out in the various different organisations. So what could we be doing that would actually make a difference? Now, I know that's a really big question, but frankly, if we can't find some ways to make a difference, then we need to be looking at ourselves in the mirror a little bit. So if there are big things that you think...
All right, then I'll speak to you soon. No worries. Bye.
Oh dear. So just at that point, somebody said bye to me. So I think that was the answer to my question. So if there are any big things you can think of, you don't need to literally come up with them off the top of your head on the spot, although we'll happily take them. But please do share them on the WhatsApp or email them or have a look on the website or email, any of the people that you happen to know on this screen. You've seen myself and Steph. I think Pete's on here as well. And we have another opportunity for people to give us their views and hear what we're getting up to next Tuesday in the early evening. So if you know anybody who you think would like to listen and would like to give us some feedback, then please do let them know there's one on next week and they can get the invite from us. Thank you, Jane. Yeah, listening to staff and flexible working. Okay. I think that fits in your remit, Michael. Okay, and I think, have we shared the link again in the chat? Yeah, okay, there we are. I'm not multitasking effectively enough. So if there isn't anything that you'd like to share immediately, there we are. There's the link. I'm just going to thank you for your time. I know everybody's incredibly busy. Thanks to Nev and Michael for coming along and presenting to you, and Chloe for pulling it all together. And please don't be strangers. Please keep in touch because, as I said earlier, a strong voice is really important, but actually it's what you do with that voice on behalf of all the people out there. So please do let us know. So thank you very much, and hopefully see you next time or at the conference or both. Bye.
Thanks, Fiona.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.